So we're continuing our introduction to JSON for Alpha Anywhere developers, and in this last section of the introduction we're going to talk about how you can make a callback from the client to the server to retrieve data from the server in JSON format and then work with the data that was sent back from the server and display it on the client. So for example, you might want to make a callback to the server to retrieve some information about a customer and then display that information in some nicely formatted HTML on the client side. So there are several steps involved in doing this. So let's start out with a button that's going to make an AJAX callback. So you can see here we've added a button that's going to make an AJAX callback, and if we look at this, the definition of this button, so it's just using action JavaScript to make the callback, and you can see that what we've done over here is we've said that this callback is going to be handled by a XBasic function called xb2, and then what we've specified is that after this function, after the AJAX callback completes, we'd like to call some JavaScript. So we're going to specify here that after the callback completes, we'd like to call this JavaScript function expand template. Now remember that an AJAX callback is asynchronous, so we can't just simply have the call to this function take place as soon as, immediately after the AJAX callback is triggered, because this function will then execute immediately as opposed to after the callback is complete. So in other words, what I'm saying here is that you can't simply go and add another action into this sequence over here and execute the on callback complete function, because it'll execute immediately unless you click the run action synchronously button. But in order to make sure that we can really understand the flow here, I've chosen not to click the run action synchronously button, and I've chosen not to put a second action after here. What I'm chosen to do is just simply specify that in the after AJAX complete event here, we'd like to call this function called expand template. So let's go now and take a look at what's inside xb2, and I can see that inside xb2 right now I have not yet written any code, so that's fine. And then inside my JavaScript function in the expand template, I'm simply getting a pointer to an element called message2. So if I go and look at my controls, I can see I have a div here called message2, and then we're just setting the inner HTML of message2 to this text. But instead of calling the inner HTML property, setting the inner HTML property directly, we're using a helper function called a5.u.element.setContent. And the reason that we're doing that is that this is the preferred way of setting the inner HTML of some element, because when you use this function, if the element that you're setting the inner HTML on had drag scrolling enabled, if you just simply set the inner HTML directly, you would destroy drag scrolling. Whereas if you use this helper function, it in effect sets the inner HTML but keeps drag scrolling intact. So this helper function is the preferred way of setting inner HTML of an element if there's the possibility that that element has drag scrolling enabled. So anyway, at this point now we've just got the basic bones of our application set up. So if I go here now and make the AJAX callback, you can see now that when the callback completes, we call the function that sets the inner HTML of this element. So next what we're going to do is look at how the JSON data that gets sent back from the server can be expanded using the templating functionality, and then how we can go and fetch JSON data from the server. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing our introduction to JSON for Alpha Anywhere programmers, and we're talking about how JSON can be used to send data from the server to the client. And now after the client receives the JSON data, we want to format that data into a nice looking HTML template. So let's go now and review the templating functionality in Alpha Anywhere. So I'm going to go now to the control panel and I'm going to open up the template tester window, and let's start out by just loading the first example over here. So we'll just get a very simple example and we'll load that over there. So here's my JSON data, but the JSON that we want to basically generate JSON that is standards compliant. So even though the JavaScript engine in the browser is able to interpret JSON where the property names are not quoted with double quotes, the JSON standard requires double quotes. So let's just click the reformat button here to get some nicely formatted JSON. So here's some JSON that we might send from the server to the client, and then here's a template over here that is going to format that JSON data. So let's go here and just make this template just a little bit richer. I'll go here and type in, say, B for the first name, and then say /B over there, and then let's go here and put a span around this span, and then say a closing span, and then inside the span we'll just go here and say something like style equals, and then say color blue. So there's our basically our template. Here's our JSON data, and then here's the result of the template. Now if we just click this show JavaScript button over here, we're going to get to actually see the JavaScript that takes the template and the JSON data and expands the HTML. So you can see here's the data, here's the JavaScript object that represents the data, here's our template over there, and then here's the alpha anywhere function that expands this data and this template to produce the HTML. So there's that. So I'm going to just copy this here to the clipboard and then go back to my example. So I'll close down the template tester right now. I'll go back to my example, and I'm going to go here to this expand template function over here, and I'm going to paste it in as is. So here's my data over there, and I'll just format this by tabbing it in, and then here's my HTML, and I'm going to just go here and put this HTML. So at this point we still haven't actually really done anything on the server side. This is all just client-side code, but we're going to just first test it out and show that it's working nicely. So we'll go here, click our button, and now what we see is the expanded template showing the data. So the next step now is to make sure that instead of this data here being hard-coded into the client-side function, we want this data here, this JSON object here, to be returned by the XBasic callback. So now again, in order to understand what we're going to do in this XBasic function, let's go and first go to the interactive window and practice a little bit, and then come back here and fill out this function. So just going back to look at our JavaScript, we can see that we want a JSON object that has first name and last name, where the first name and last name properties are in lowercase. So we'll go here to our interactive window now, and let's just go and delete that existing code here. I'll say delete dim p dot first name equals, say, Fred, and then I just got an error over here, so let me just go and fix this. So I'll pause now actually and pick this up in the next video where we'll fix this up. So we're continuing now with our introduction to JSON for Alpha Anywhere programmers, and now we're just in the interactive window practicing how we can get the XBasic to generate the JSON that we need. And I can see here that I've forgotten the as C over there. So there's we've now dimmed first name, and I'm going to go here and say dim p dot last name as C equals say Smith, and then I can go here and say question mark JSON generate of P, and I'm going to get the JSON that we want to send back from the server to the client. So let's go here and just simply copy this to the clipboard, go back to our script here, now go to our XBasic functions, and this is the XBasic here that is going to be called, this function is going to be called when we make our AJAX callback. So we'll just go here and paste in some values over here, and then just for good measure, why don't we basically go here and say dim p dot date as c equals, and then we'll go here and type in date. So now what we've done is we've actually generated today's date on the server and sent it back as part of our JSON object as a string. So now we need to convert this into JSON. So let's go here and say dim JSON as c, and then JSON equals JSON generative p. So now we have a string in XBasic that represents the JSON data in this object, and now we need to basically compose the JavaScript that we're going to send back to the client. So let's go now and say something like dim JS as c, and then JS equals, and now we need to basically create the JavaScript that's going to be sent back to the client. So what I want to do here in this JavaScript that I'm going to send back to the client is put this JSON data in a variable where I can read it, and because I don't want to put the variable in the JavaScript global namespace, I'm going to actually put this variable in the dialog object itself. So let's go here and write our code. So we'll go here and we'll type dialog.object. So this is the dialog object, and then I'll just go here and say maybe underbar data equals, and then I'll go here and say plus JSON. So now we've generated and then I'll put a plus semicolon to terminate the string. So this is now a JavaScript command that we're going to send back to the client that's going to put the JSON data in this temporary variable inside the dialog object. And then let's go here now and just say xb2 equals JS. So now we've now sent our response back from the server to the client, and we've put the JSON data inside a variable in the UX component. So let's now go and test this out and see how it's working. So we go over to working preview, we click this button over here, and it's not really clear if it's working or not because this says Fred Smith and the data that we sent over here says Fred Smith. So let's go and change this to say John Jones, and then when we click the button, we'll see that it still says Fred Smith. And the reason it still says Fred Smith is that we've done nothing on our client side to actually use this this data over here. So let's go back now to our client side code, and sorry, to our JavaScript code here. And now this is where we want to read the value. Instead of reading the data here out of this hard-coded value, we want to read the value out of the UX components underbar data property. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video.